The storm had passed in the night. By dawn, the retreat was washed clean, the air crisp with salt and silence. A pale band of sunlight stretched across the curtains, painting the room in gold. Georgia stirred first. Her body ached, but in a way that felt like memory etched into her skin. She lay still for a moment, eyes closed, replaying the fragments, Abby's mouth on hers, Abby's voice whispering her name, the way the girl had looked at her as though she were both untouchable and entirely hers. When she opened her eyes, Abby was there, curled against her chest, hair mussed, lips parted in sleep. Her bare shoulder rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. Georgia felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with something heavier, sweeter, belonging. She brushed a strand of hair from Abby's face, letting her fingers linger against her cheek. Abby stirred, murmured something unintelligible, then blinked awake. Her eyes found Georgia's, and in an instant the whole night came flooding back between them. "Hi," Abby whispered, her voice still thick with sleep. Georgia smiled softly.
Eat.
For a moment they just stared at each other, sharing the kind of silence that needed no words. Then Abby shifted, sliding higher until her lips brushed Georgia's. The kiss was gentle, morning slow, but it sent the same fire curling through Georgia's body. "Last night wasn't a dream, was it?" Abby asked, pulling back slightly, her gaze uncertain but glowing. "No," Georgia murmured, pressing her forehead to Abby's. "It was the realest thing I've ever known." Abby's lips trembled into a smile. She kissed her again, deeper this time, her hand sliding across Georgia's stomach. Georgia gasped softly, heat sparking low, but she caught Abby's hand gently, stilling it. "Careful," she teased, though her voice was husky. "I don't think I'd survive another storm like that so soon." Abby laughed, the sound breaking through the heaviness. She buried her face against Georgia's neck, pressing small kisses there. "You underestimate me," she whispered, lips brushing skin. "I think I could spend forever learning how to touch you." The words sent a shiver down Georgia's spine. She tilted Abby's chin up, capturing her mouth in another kiss, slow but unhurried, as though they had all the time in the world. Their bodies tangled again, skin against skin, but this time it wasn't frantic. It was languid, exploratory, the kind of intimacy that came not from hunger, but from the need to stay close, to reassure. When they finally pulled apart, Abby traced idle patterns on George's chest. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. "What happens now?" Georgia's stomach tightened. She had known the question was coming, but she wasn't ready for it. She shifted, propping herself up on one elbow to look at Abby fully. "We can't ignore what this is anymore," Georgia admitted. "But we also can't be careless. People wouldn't understand." Abby frowned, her brows knitting. "Because I'm your student." "Yes," Georgia said softly. "And because the world always finds ways to punish women for loving each other. Especially like this." Abby's chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. "But I don't care what they think. I only care about you." Georgia cupped her face gently, her thumb stroking her cheek. "And I care about you more than I should, which means I have to protect us, even if it means keeping secrets for now." Abby searched her eyes, then nodded slowly. She understood, but her lips pressed into a stubborn line. "I can keep secrets," she whispered, "but I don't want to feel like I'm something you have to hide." The words cut deep. Georgia kissed her forehead, holding her closer. "You're not something to hide. You're the only thing I want to show the world. But until it's safe, until I can figure out how, let's just hold on to this." Abby sighed, burying her face against Georgia's chest again. "Okay." They lay like that for a long time, tangled in sheets and sunlight, letting the weight of reality settle between them without crushing what they had found. Eventually, the sound of voices drifted from outside, the other retreat members returning from their morning walk. Georgia stiffened, instinctively aware of the risk. Abby noticed. She kissed her shoulder gently. "Don't worry.
No one has to know yet.
This is ours." Georgia exhaled, pressing a final kiss to Abby's hair. "Ours," she echoed. But as she rose to gather her clothes, as Abby pulled the blanket around her bare body, Georgia couldn't ignore the flutter of fear beneath the warmth. Desire was easy. Love was easy. But the world outside this room would not be. Still, as Abby watched her dress, her eyes filled with quiet devotion, Georgia knew she would risk everything to keep the girls' gaze on her like that. The retreat resumed its rhythm the next day, but for Georgia and Abby, everything felt altered, charged. Conversations at breakfast blurred into noise. Laughter from their colleagues seemed distant, unreal. All Georgia could focus on was the press of Abby's knee against hers under the table, the secret brush of fingers when no one was watching. Abby, emboldened by their night together, seemed almost reckless with her smiles. Every glance she gave Georgia carried the echo of intimacy, the memory of lips, of skin, of whispered names in the dark. Georgia felt both dizzy with desire and terrified that someone might see right through them. After breakfast, they drifted apart as if nothing had happened. Georgia forced herself into the library room, pretending to read, her heart pounding too fast. She couldn't concentrate. Every sentence blurred into Abby's face, Abby's moan, Abby's trembling plea. Don't stop. Hours passed, sunlight shifting across the walls, until at last the others decided to take a walk into town. Abby stayed behind, feigning a headache. Georgia's pulse skipped when she heard it, knowing instantly what it meant. She gave it 10 minutes before slipping quietly back to her room. Abby was waiting. The moment Georgia closed the door, Abby crossed the space between them and kissed her with a hunger that stole the air from her lungs. Georgia stumbled back against the wall, laughing breathlessly against Abby's mouth, her hands already tangling in the girl's hair. God, you're going to kill me, Georgia murmured, her lips bruised by the force of Abby's kiss. Then die with me, Abby whispered, pressing her body flush against hers. Georgia groaned, her restraint unraveling. She spun them, pushing Abby gently against the door, kissing her fiercely, devouring her like she'd starved all day. Their hands roamed desperately, tugging at shirts, sliding beneath waistbands, every touch electric. You drive me insane, Georgia breathed against her lips. I can't think straight when you're near me. Then don't think, Abby gasped, arching into her touch. Just feel. Their mouths crashed together again, sloppy and wild, teeth clashing, tongues tangling. Georgia's hand slid beneath Abby's shirt, cupping her breast, and Abby cried out softly, her knees buckling. Georgia caught her, lifting her just enough to steady her, their bodies pressed so tightly it felt like one. The kiss deepened until Abby was trembling, whimpering into her mouth. Georgia pulled back only long enough to murmur, "Bed." Abby nodded, eyes dark with need. They stumbled across the room, shedding clothes in frantic movements until Abby was bare again, sprawled across the sheets, her hair wild, her chest heaving. Georgia froze for just a second, drinking her in. "You're a vision," she whispered hoarsely. "I'll never get enough of you." Abby reached for her, tugging her down. "Then take me." And Georgia did. Their lovemaking that afternoon was different than the storm-fueled frenzy of the night before. It was faster, riskier, sharpened by the possibility of being caught. Every gasp, every cry had to be muffled against lips, against skin, against sheets. Abby bit Georgia's shoulder to keep from moaning too loud, her nails clawing down her back. Georgia's hand clamped over Abby's mouth as she drove her higher and higher, whispering harshly in her ear, "Quiet, love, quiet, or they'll hear us." The danger only fueled Abby's desire. She writhed beneath Georgia, her eyes wet, her body straining, until she broke apart in shuddering waves, her muffled scream vibrating against Georgia's palm. Georgia followed soon after, undone by Abby's body and Abby's eyes and the sheer insanity of wanting her this much. They collapsed together, sweaty, shaking, their breaths ragged. Abby giggled suddenly, covering her mouth. "We're going to get caught one day." Georgia kissed her nose, still breathless. "Then I guess we'll just have to be more careful." But even as she said it, she knew caution would never be enough. The fire between them was impossible to hide, impossible to contain. Later that evening, After the others had returned, Georgia found herself sitting with Abby on the porch while the group chatted around them. The sun had set, and the night air hummed with cicadas. Abby leaned casually against the railing, sipping her drink, but her knee pressed lightly against Georgia's under the cover of darkness. "You're quiet," Abby whispered, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. Georgia glanced at her, her heart aching. "I'm just thinking how impossible this feels. How dangerous. And how worth it?" Abby asked, her eyes searching hers. Georgia swallowed hard, her throat tight.
Yes.
God, yes. They held each other's gaze for one stolen moment longer than was safe, their secret glowing between them like fireflies in the dark. The night unfurled slowly, as if the universe itself had decided to hold its breath. The sea was restless, but not angry, its waves pushing and pulling at the shore in a rhythm that echoed the tension inside Abby's chest. The lanterns they had lit outside cast a honeyed glow across the veranda, the kind of light that made everything look softer, more alive. Georgia sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, her wine glass barely touched, eyes fixed on Abby as though there was nothing else in existence worth noticing. "Do you ever feel like we've been walking toward this night since the first time we met?" Georgia's voice was low, husky, almost a confession. Abby's pulse fluttered. "Yes," she whispered, "even when I tried to pretend otherwise." Silence fell between them again, not awkward, but thick, like the air before a storm. Georgia reached out, brushing her fingers lightly over Abby's wrist, the simplest touch, and yet it sent Abby's entire body into a shiver of anticipation. Abby closed her eyes for a moment, trying to anchor herself, but when she opened them again, Georgia's face was so close, her breath warm against her cheek. The kiss came slowly, as if they were riding it into the night instead of rushing to claim it. Lips brushed once, twice, before finally pressing together fully, tender at first, then deepening with a hunger neither could contain. Abby whimpered softly into Georgia's mouth, her hands sliding up to cup her jaw, feeling the heat of her skin. Georgia's tongue parted her lips, seeking, tasting, and Abby gave in completely, her body leaning forward until she was nearly in Georgia's lap. When they pulled apart, Abby's chest was heaving. "Georgia, don't stop," Georgia murmured, voice frayed with need. "Please don't stop." And Abby didn't. She leaned in again, kissing her harder this time, their mouths clashing with a mix of tenderness and desperation. Georgia's hand slid into Abby's hair, tugging gently, while her other hand explored the curve of Abby's waist through the thin fabric of her summer dress. The sensation was electric. Every brush of Georgia's fingers made Abby's body burn hotter, ache deeper. She had never been touched like this, with such reverence, such intensity. Abby shifted, swinging one leg over until she straddled Georgia fully. The movement drew a ragged gasp from Georgia, who gripped her tighter, pulling her against her chest. Abby could feel the rapid thrum of Georgia's heart beneath her palm, could feel the rise and fall of her breaths that were now broken, urgent. Their kisses grew wilder, messier, the taste of wine and desire blending on their tongues. Abby rocked against her, instinctive, seeking friction, and the low moan that tore from Georgia's throat nearly unraveled her. "Abby," Georgia breathed, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. Her pupils were wide, her lips swollen, her voice trembling. "I want you, but only if you want this too. All of it." Abby's answer came in a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything she felt. "I've never wanted anything more." Something shifted then, something irreversible. Georgia's hands slid beneath the hem of Abby's dress, fingertips brushing against the bare skin of her thighs. Abby gasped, arching slightly, her body already aching for more. She tangled her hands in Georgia's hair, pulling her into another kiss as Georgia's palms roamed higher, higher, until they cupped her hips with a possessive tenderness. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only this, the heat of skin against skin, the trembling breaths, the whispered gasps that filled the night like music. Georgia stood abruptly, strong arms wrapping around Abby, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. Abby clung to her shoulders, legs tightening around her waist, breathless with the sudden closeness. Georgia carried her inside, through the open sliding doors, into the quiet intimacy of her bedroom. The sheets were cool against Abby's back as Georgia laid her down, her body hovering above hers, eyes locked like a promise. For a moment they just stared at each other, hearts pounding, both trembling at the edge of something vast and uncharted. Then Georgia lowered herself, lips finding Abby's neck, kissing slowly down the line of her throat. Abby gasped, tilting her head back, offering herself up. Every press of Georgia's mouth left fire in its wake. Every scrape of her teeth made Abby's body arch in need. Her dress slipped off one shoulder, then the other, until Georgia eased it down completely, revealing Abby's trembling form. Georgia's eyes darkened with awe, reverence mingled with desire. "You're so beautiful," she murmured, voice breaking. "God, Abby." Abby flushed under the intensity of her gaze, but she didn't look away. Instead, she reached up, tugging gently at Georgia's shirt until she helped peel it away, bearing the smooth strength of her body. Skin met skin, warm and electric. Abby wrapped her arms around her, pulling her closer, their breasts pressing together, their lips colliding again with a hunger that had no patience left. Hands roamed freely now, tracing curves, gripping, caressing, learning each other with a devotion that felt both sacred and wild. Abby gasped when Georgia's hand slid between them, fingers brushing where she ached most. Her cry was muffled against Georgia's mouth, her hips bucking instinctively into her touch. "Is this okay?" Georgia whispered urgently, pulling back just enough to see her face. "Yes," Abby panted, voice desperate. "Please don't stop." Georgia's fingers moved slowly at first, teasing, exploring, coaxing Abby into a rhythm of moans and sighs. Abby clutched at the sheets, her body trembling as pleasure built inside her like a storm. Every kiss, every stroke was threaded with love, with reverence, with unspoken vows. Abby cried out, her body arching as Georgia guided her higher and higher, until the wave finally crashed over her, leaving her shaking and breathless beneath her lover's touch. Georgia kissed her through it, gentle and unyielding, whispering her name like a prayer. When Abby finally opened her eyes, dazed and trembling, Georgia was looking down at her with such tenderness that it brought tears to her eyes. "I love you," Abby whispered, raw and certain. Georgia froze, her expression breaking into something fierce and vulnerable all at once. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." They kissed again, slower now, but no less passionate. Abby rolled them over, straddling Georgia this time, determined to give back everything she had just received. Her hands roamed with newfound confidence, her lips trailing fire down Georgia's chest. Georgia gasped, her body arching, surrendering. The night stretched endlessly, filled with cries and whispers, with tender confessions and breathless laughter. They gave themselves to each other completely, body, heart, and soul, until there was no more fear, no more restraint. Only love. Only them. The first thing Abby noticed was the sound of the ocean. Soft, steady, like it had been all night, a rhythm that matched the rise and fall of Georgia's breathing beside her. The second thing she noticed was warmth, the heat of Georgia's body against her own, their legs tangled beneath the sheets, their bare skin pressed together, as if neither had let go even in sleep. Abby lay still, afraid to move, afraid to break the fragile spell that hung in the room. The air smelled faintly of salt and candle wax, of wine, and the lingering sweetness of their bodies. Her lips still tingled from George's kisses, her thighs still trembled faintly from the intensity of the night. And yet, beneath it all, there was a calm, a profound, bone-deep peace she had never known before. Georgia stirred, shifting against her. Abby held her breath as the older woman's eyes fluttered open, hazy and slow, like the dawn itself was reluctant to wake her. When their gazes met, Abby expected embarrassment, or perhaps hesitation. But Georgia only smiled, soft and tender, brushing a strand of hair from Abby's face. "Good morning, beautiful." Abby's heart ached at the words, At the way Georgia said them with such sincerity, it nearly undid her. She let out a shaky laugh. Good morning. Though I think it's barely morning. Georgia leaned in, pressing a lazy kiss to her lips. Unhurried. Familiar now. Time doesn't matter today. Just us. The kiss deepened, and Abby melted instantly, a sigh escaping against George's mouth. Soon, they were rolling into each other again, hands exploring, lips tracing familiar paths that felt both new and eternal. Abby gasped when George's hand slid over her hip, fingers trailing lightly down her thigh. Her body answered before her mind could, arching into the touch, craving more. Already? Georgia teased gently, voice low and husky. Abby flushed, biting her lip. I can't help it. You make me. She trailed off, embarrassed, but Georgia caught her chin, forcing her to meet her eyes. Don't hide from me, Georgia whispered. Not now. Not ever. Tell me. Abby swallowed, cheeks burning. You make me want everything. Again and again. The look that passed over George's face was half predator, half poet, desire tempered by adoration. She kissed her fiercely, rolling her beneath her, their bodies pressing together with a heat that quickly burned away any hesitation. Their second time was different. Less frantic, more knowing. Georgia moved with patience, with deliberate care, as if she wanted to savor every inch of Abby's body. Her hands mapped familiar curves, her lips worshipped tender places, her voice guided Abby through waves of pleasure that built slowly, surely, until Abby was crying out beneath her once again. After, Abby curled into Georgia's arms, trembling, her head resting against her chest. Georgia stroked her hair, pressing kisses into the crown of her head. You're incredible, she murmured, voice thick with emotion. Abby lifted her head just enough to meet her gaze. Last night, this morning, none of it felt like just sex. It felt like... She stopped, afraid to say the word too soon, afraid to break whatever fragile thing they had built. But Georgia finished it for her, her voice steady. Like love. Abby's breath hitched. Tears pricked at her eyes. She nodded.
Yes.
Exactly. They kissed again, slower this time, lips brushing like promises. The rest of the morning unfolded in fragments of tenderness. Georgia making coffee in nothing but one of Abby's shirts, laughing when Abby blushed at the sight. Abby standing on the veranda, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sea while Georgia came up behind her, arms circling her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. They talked about nothing and everything. Books they loved, cities they wanted to visit, the simple, mundane details that suddenly felt profound because they were sharing them. And yet, beneath the warmth, a shadow lingered. The world outside this room still existed. The university, the rules, the judgment that could come if their relationship was discovered. Abby voiced it quietly. Later that afternoon, when they lay tangled again in bed, sheets kicked to the floor, their skin glowing with sweat and sunlight. What happens when we go back? Georgia stiffened slightly, but didn't let go. She sighed, staring up at the ceiling. I don't know. But I do know this, I don't regret a single thing. Not one kiss, not one touch. You're worth it, Abby. Whatever comes. Abby's chest tightened. She pressed a kiss to Georgia's shoulder, whispering, You're worth it too. More than you'll ever know. The rest of the day passed like a dream, one they both clung to desperately, as though the outside world couldn't possibly intrude as long as they stayed wrapped in each other. That night, as they lay in bed again, Abby traced lazy patterns on Georgia's chest with her fingertip. Promise me something, she murmured. Anything. Promise me this isn't just a summer thing. Promise me you won't let it fade when we're back at school. Georgia caught her hand, pressing a kiss into her palm. Her eyes were fierce, unyielding. I promise. This isn't temporary, Abby. You're not temporary. You're everything. Tears slid silently down Abby's cheeks. She kissed her again, softly, desperately, and in that kiss, she believed her. For the first time in her life, Abby felt truly, irrevocably loved. And it terrified her. And it saved her. Both at once. The final night of the retreat arrived wrapped in gold and blue, the sun sinking into the sea, scattering molten light across the horizon as though the sky itself wanted to set fire to the world in honor of them. Abby stood barefoot on the beach, the hem of her dress swaying in the warm wind. She had never felt so alive, so trembling with both certainty and fear. Behind her, Georgia approached slowly, her footsteps crunching over sand, her shadows stretching long and tall across the fading light. When Abby turned, their eyes locked, and the world seemed to still. Georgia smiled, soft and reverent. "I'll never get tired of looking at you like this. Like you're the only thing the ocean should worship." Abby's cheeks flushed. "You always know exactly what to say." Georgia stepped closer, her hand reaching out, fingers brushing Abby's cheek. "Not always. But with you, the words come easy." Abby leaned into her touch, closing her eyes for a moment. Then she whispered, "Take me inside. Tonight. I want everything."
Not just a part of you.
"All of you." The look on Georgia's face was molten, a mixture of awe and hunger. Without another word, she laced their fingers together and led Abby back up the sand, back to the cottage glowing softly with lantern light. Inside, the room seemed to pulse with anticipation. The ocean's rhythm filtered through the open windows, a constant heartbeat beneath the silence. Georgia turned to face Abby, cupping her face with both hands, kissing her as though the universe depended on it. This kiss was different. Fiercer. Hungrier. Years of restraint and longing poured into every movement of their mouths. Abby whimpered, clinging to Georgia's shirt, desperate to feel more. They moved together toward the bed, shedding clothes between kisses, leaving a trail of fabric across the wooden floor. Abby's dress fell first, then Georgia's shirt, then everything else until nothing stood between them but heat and trembling skin. When Abby looked at Georgia fully bare for the first time, her breath caught. She wasn't intimidated, she was captivated. Her body was strong yet softened by curves, glowing in the lantern light like a statue carved of fire. "You're staring," Georgia teased gently, though her voice quivered. Abby's lips parted, her voice raw with honesty. "How could I not? You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Georgia's composure faltered, her eyes glistening. She pulled Abby close, kissing her with such ferocity that they both stumbled onto the bed, tangled in sheets and laughter that quickly turned to gasps. Their lovemaking that night was no longer tentative, no longer careful. It was a wildfire, consuming, unapologetic, yet still threaded with moments of tenderness that made Abby's heart ache. Georgia's mouth traveled everywhere, down Abby's neck, over her chest, across her stomach, leaving Abby arching, gasping, pleading. Abby's hands clutched at her hair, her back, her shoulders, kneading her closer, kneading her everywhere at once. When Georgia finally touched her where she ached most, Abby cried out, her body lifting off the bed in desperate surrender. Georgia's fingers were both gentle and commanding, drawing out sounds Abby never knew she could make, unraveling her piece by piece until she shattered in waves of pleasure that stole her breath. But Georgia didn't stop there. She kissed her through the tremors, whispered her name like a prayer, then shifted so that Abby could touch her in return. At first, Abby hesitated, overwhelmed by the power of giving back. But Georgia guided her, murmuring encouragement between kisses, showing her how to explore, how to love her body with hands and mouth, and whispered devotion. When Georgia finally broke beneath her touch, crying out Abby's name into the night, Abby felt something inside her burst open, a fierce, protective love so strong it brought tears to her eyes. They lay tangled in sweat and kisses afterward, but even then, it wasn't enough. They touched again, and again, exploring each other with growing confidence until the boundaries between them dissolved completely. Hours passed like minutes. The ocean roared outside, the lanterns flickered low, but inside, they were endless. At one point, Abby lay sprawled across George's chest, both of them still breathless, their hearts racing. She whispered into the silence, "I'm scared. Not of this, but of losing it. Of losing you." Georgia tilted her chin up, her eyes fierce, unwavering. "You won't lose me. No matter what waits for us outside this cottage, no matter what anyone says, I am yours. Do you understand? Yours." Abby's throat tightened. She kissed her again, softly, desperately, sealing the vow between their lips. Later still, when exhaustion finally began to tug at their bodies, Abby whispered into the darkness, "I love you." Georgia tightened her arms around her, pressing a kiss into her hair. "I love you more. Enough to fight for this. For us." The night burned on, filled with sighs and whispers, with bodies joining over and over until they had nothing left to give but their souls. When dawn finally touched the horizon, painting the room in pale gold, they were still wrapped in each other, two women who had surrendered everything and, in return, found everything they had ever needed. For Abby, it was the first time in her life she felt wholly seen, wholly loved. For Georgia, it was the first time she let herself believe she deserved such love. And for both of them, it was only the beginning.